So as for our final seventh speaker, we are thrilled to welcome Sagar Shukla, class of 2015, to spend some time with us this afternoon and to tell us his story. Sagar, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone for joining. It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to the talk. So to kick things off, my talk is titled Transitionary Experiences, How to Identify Them and Make the Most of Them, which is ironic because there's been a lot of transitionary experiences in my life over the past couple of weeks even. So we'll be talking about those and hopefully making sense of that for you all. So before I start the talk officially, I wanted to share my screen and just give you some context for what this actually is that I'm talking about. Can you see the black screen? Okay, great. So this is, I'm going to start with a metaphor and we'll drive the length of my talk. So in my mind, this is how life begins, right? This is a black box, a dark map of life. And at some point in life, you get a light to shine across this dark map. And this might be when you're growing up, you get sensory, you're able to see and smell and taste the world. And then when you go to college, you have independence and you can start to explore your own identity within Chapel Hill and the university. And then if you have a crazy experience over a summer or with an alumnus, this all starts to reveal the world around you. And for me, this is what a transitionary experience is. It's illuminating what is unilluminated, right? These different areas of the map, leaving the known for the unknown and really starting to feel out who you are going through this journey and who you become as part of it. And this should be pretty familiar. This is actually a map of Chapel Hill, if you can see closely. And all of us on this call have experienced this, right? You can see the old well right in the middle, the Morehead Foundation at the top, Coker Arboretum, the pit, Lenore on the bottom right. So this could be a first day of a Chapel Hill student's experience at the university. And you're going through a lot of these transitionary experiences. You're figuring out your paths to get from point A to point B. You're going to class. You're getting more confident as you're exploring the map that is school and the map that becomes your life at school. So that being said, everybody here has gone through this type of experience. And my purpose today is to share some of my experiences and my map of life that have informed how I want to live it and how they all have connected the dots for me. This is not chronological by any means. It's really a literal map that I feel like I go back to certain areas as time progresses. And there's three stories I want to share. One that taught me about intention, another that taught me about action, and another that taught me about detachment. I think these are three themes that are going to drive this seven talk for today. So let me stop sharing my screen. The first story here is a tough conversation I had with my mom. And I think there have been many of these over the years, but they get better and better each time. And I think the pretext to this is when I went to Chapel Hill, my first year, I was pre-med. I was pretty strong in the math and sciences. I'd gone to the School of Science and Math. And when I went to school, I felt like I had to prove something to myself. And I was taking a lot of intense classes and I was trying to go down this path. And it ended up resulting in just a big revelation for me. So first year after school ended, went to Bolivia with my fellow scholars. Peacemaker Myung, Camille Morgan, John Powers were three individuals I shared the summer with, and it was an incredible experience. We were staying with host families and speaking in Spanish and helping a local community with their water issues. But on the weekends and the rest of the time, we were literally exploring this country, which we had no idea about, right? It was this metaphorical map that we were physically exploring. And I think through that, I started to explore my own subconscious and my own psychology. And I started to detach from this idea of becoming a doctor, going down this specific path. There's a couple moments during that summer which really were eye-opening for me. One in particular was, it's pretty silly, but we went on a hike on the salt flats in Bolivia, and somebody had gotten hurt. They got scraped their foot and they were bloody, and we had to take care of them. And in that moment, I realized I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this. Someone in pain and seeing them hurt and seeing this blood. And those are just one of many moments that made me realize my intention was different. It was no longer focused on wanting to become a doctor or go down that path. And I think there's a lot of other pieces that happened through my summer, but that culminated in my mom dropping me off to Chapel Hill for my sophomore year. And she was asking me in the car, we were driving from Charlotte, it was a 2-hour car ride, and 30 minutes left on the ride. She said, so what's your plan for the year? What are you going to be doing? What classes are you taking? And I said, Mom, look, to be honest with you, I'm going to be dropping everything. I'm dropping my chemistry major. I'm going to be dropping pre-med. I don't really know what I want to do with my life next, but I'll figure it out and it'll be okay. And, I think for me, it was very unsettling to say that to her, someone who had confided in me for a long time. And it was very unsettling for her as well. And I feel bad, honestly, about how I made her feel in that moment. And I've since learned how to communicate such decisions with parents. But I think that was a really big step for me in this journey of exploring the map, because it was the first time I left something that was known in my life for something else. And intention was a defining piece of that. The second story was leaving companies. So fast forward, I eventually studied economics. I worked with various startup companies. One particular experience was working with Terry Bowman, who's on this call. So hello, Terry. It was a fantastic experience. It's completely defined my time in New York at that time, and hello. And we've become very close friends since, and I'm just very appreciative of that. So I just want to give a shout out to Terry. But I think beyond that, extending, I just started getting more into the startup world, technology world, and ended up at a company called Red Ventures for my first year out of college. And it was a good experience, but a year in, I was feeling these feelings again, as I felt in Bolivia, which was, I thought I was going down this path that made sense. I was working in a pretty up and coming company, and I had great people around me, but there's a cognitive dissonance there. And I remember being very stressed when a VP asked me to put together a report for a business review. I just couldn't get myself to do it. I was just so anxious and overwhelmed with the ask. And I think that was a signal for me, just like the signal of seeing someone with blood on their feet when they got hurt in Bolivia. It was a tell. It was an awareness piece. And what resulted from that is I left the company. I didn't have another plan. I didn't have another job to go to. I just left, and I trusted myself to figure it out. This is the next part of figuring out the map. And that decision turned out to be one of the greatest decisions I ever made, because 3 months later, I cold emailed a company when I was looking for jobs. It turned out to be this 10-person startup I joined in Charlotte, and it defined my next 4 years. We grew from 10 people to 200 people. We got acquired. I moved to New York. I joined the parent company, traveled the world, being able to sell the software, and it was just an incredible ride, and very appreciative of that. But then again, I reached this point, and this is where the recent days come in. Since COVID hit, I was with this company, and this intention of the startups and what I was working on, back in college, and the internships that I was doing, resurfaced, and realized, look, it's time to make a change again. This part of the map has been explored. It's time to move on. So recently made the decision to leave the company about 3 weeks ago, and I'm working on a personal venture at this point, and going to try to solve some of the problems in the software industry that I faced over the past 4 years. So it's time to make another change, and that's the most recent transition in as part of this talk, I guess. So that's story number 2, and that taught me about action. Right, I had these intentions in my life, and it was time to actually take action and do something about it. The final story here, which is a wild card of sorts, is deals in the realm of acting. So I've always had a performative side of me that I've explored through the years. In school, I was on a dance team called the Bhangra team at the college, and we got to travel all over and dance. I did some improv comedy when I was in school, and there's something I needed to explore, right? This other part of the map that had to be revealed to myself. So when I came to New York 2 years ago, I said, all right, this is my chance. Let me try to audition for an acting school. Let's just see what happens, right? Who knows? And I did that, and got into this class that's been incredible. So a couple moments in this class that were defining for me was I was doing some scenes, basically a scene study. So you do scenes with your partner, and the teacher had studied under Herbert Berghoff, Uta Hagen. These are pantheons of acting, and they very well, entrenched in the world. And he was watching me and observing me during one of my scenes. And after I was done, he said, something's off. So I can't tell what it is, but it doesn't seem like you're you. And that stopped me, and that really made me start to have some existential question about, well, what am I doing? You know, what's going on? What am I not doing? And he said, can you speak in your native tongue? So there were 20 people in the class, and he said, just speak in your native tongue, which is Gujarati. So I said, Kem cho, mar naam Sagar che, u 8 wage uthi gyo aaj and powa khadu, which basically means I woke up today, you know, I had some breakfast and I'm here now. And he was like, he paused. He said, that's it. I need you to do what you just did in every scene. And I think what happened for me in that moment was a detachment. You know, I was trying to work for something in the scene every time. I was trying to reach for a result or an outcome. But what I really needed to do was detach from the result and what I thought the character wanted out of the scene, and really what experience I was having. I needed to have my own personal experience through that scene. And that's really what he was trying to teach me. And he said one thing that has always stuck with me since. He said, to be completely free, you have to be totally open. And that's something that I still reckon with to this day. And I'm trying to understand what he meant by that. But I think for me, it comes down to detachment, right? I had to detach my own sense of self and what I was trying to accomplish and just have the experience in the class. So 3 different stories, 3 different areas. And I think, you know, what that's taught me, I'm going to share my screen again to pull it all together here, is really what a transitionary experience is for me and what it means for me in my life. So what I think it is we've mentioned this, choosing to leave the known for the unknown. What that really means is illuminating those areas in your life that are unilluminated, right? Going into Bolivia and leaving the pre-med program, you know, leaving the companies twice, going into this acting world, which I had no idea about. And it really is about the journey that I'm having or that we're having over a specific destination to reach. And I think the 3 things that really helped me identify these moments and make the most of them was it all started with an intention. I had to be in touch with an intention within myself that I felt strongly about, or that I knew was true, that translated into some type of action, which was, you know, leaving the company or starting the company I'm starting now, and detaching from the result. So again, focusing on the journey versus the destination. And I think throughout all of this, awareness of myself and patience with the process has been really key. And I think ultimately, you know, what all this has taught me is I'm not trying to reach a destination anymore. I just want to have fun exploring what's on my map. And that's what I'd like to leave you all with, and happy to discuss.
See applause. lots of Zoom applause. Any questions for Sagar? I'd love to, or any compliments. Or Jane Summers Kelly says, tell us more about detachment. How might we or others apply this? Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, I think this is something that I've been trying to actively practice in my life in a number of different areas, whether it be professionally or with relationships or with any material goods. I think it comes down to being mindful about your intention in a sense. So for example, you know, being in my prior life in the software company, we're very goal oriented, right? To close these deals, you have to sell X number of dollars in quota and meet that need. And you know, there's a lot of pressure to go and do that. But I think to do that in a detached way it almost is as a freeing thing, right? Like you don't want to put pressure on yourself as an individual that I'm tying my self-worth to this deal, or I'm tying my self-worth to this outcome. And so I think detachment for me means the outcome and whatever the result is independent of my own actions and my own process. And I think that for me has been really freeing. And it's something that I'm still working on. I don't really have a best practice there, but I think hopefully that answers your question, and how we can apply it is removing
Powerful. Thanks, Sagar.
Yeah.
That rings a real bell. I use the word acceptance because we're all such high achievers, and you don't can't control it all. So it might not sound similar to detachment, but that rings very true.
Sagar, knowing you and thinking back of when I first met you, couple of things are interesting. One is, and I want you to think about and respond to these. One is your almost complete lack of defensiveness about expectations. Like there was a quality to you that when I first met you, that was just like open in a way, like suggestions were welcomed. And so I want to hear you say a little bit where you think that comes from. And then I think the other part of this is the level of courage that it takes. Obviously, you haven't, become Mother Teresa. So, it's not like you're forsaking all of the life that you were brought up in, but how do you understand and explain the courageous part, and where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, those are really good questions. I think the openness and ability to, I guess, listen. I'll have to think about that. I think it really comes from my family upbringing and my parents. I'm the oldest on both sides of my family, and I think we went through a lot of changes where I learning about my family's story, and I think my grandfather came to the U.S. when he was 17 and didn't really have much to build on, and he basically had to raise a family and go through that whole process here. So I think it's maybe built into my family to some extent, and trying to just be ourselves in this country, and seeing my parents gone through their own experiences. So I guess I'm gonna answer your question differently, is in terms of courage. So my dad, he had a unique story. He grew up here and went to school at UNC Charlotte, did that for a couple of years, and then left college basically to buy a record store, like buy a vinyl record store. He loved music, he loved indie rock, and which was unusual for an Indian man in the 80s, I guess, to do that. And he then opened up different clubs, and he started signing record labels. He named a record label after my mom when she moved from India to the US, and he just did that. And at some point he said, let me go back to college and get my journalism degree when he was 40 years old, right? And then and along the way he started a magazine and with his brother, and that's still running today. And it was just, he somehow figured out that's just what he needs to do and what he wants to do, and he was at peace with that and peace with the process. So I think, kind of rambling on here, but I think it comes from some actions within my family history, and being resonating with that to some extent.
I have a question. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on one of the difficulties I have in transitionary experiences is the feeling of like, I've put in so much hard work towards a previous goal. And like being able to let go of that is a really, really hard thing, because it feels like it can be all for nothing sometimes. And also when you choose to go down a new path, a lot of the times you're entering that as a beginner or having less experience than other people. And you feel like, oh, everyone's already so ahead of me in a new pursuit. And I was wondering if that's something you've felt, or like how you work through that.
Yeah, definitely feeling the latter part of what you just said. I'm feeling that right now, because I just left my company. I'm trying to start a company within the software space, and I'm seeing how quickly technology is moving and what people have done in the past and what they're doing today. And you definitely feel like an imposter, right? It's like, I'm going to try to have one tiny speck in this sea of change that's happening, and it's very overwhelming. So I think for me, it's been about realizing what I've always leaned on and what my strengths have been is ability to listen and learn and just figure it out and be innovative and come up with the right solutions, and take it one step at a time, right? And take one step in the direction that feels right, and let that lead to the next step. And I guess the part of what you said is you've already put in a lot of sunk costs potentially into doing something. And I think part of this is questioning why were you spending so much time doing that? Why were you choosing to have that be your goal? What is actually underlying that? So I think for me, just asking why a number of times in something that I thought was important has helped me try to get to the bottom of something. That's really conceptual, but I think that can help you really understand what's at the core of why you've maybe spent a ton of time doing research in a particular field versus maybe applying that elsewhere. If that does that help or answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Thanks.
Cool.
Sagar, we have a question from an anonymous person who has asked me to pose their question, but as the person says, I'd be curious to know how he's maybe had to adapt or rethink the framework with all that 2020 continues to throw at us.
Sorry, broke up just a bit. You said how to
you've had to rethink the framework with all that 2020 has been throwing at us.
Yeah, totally. It's a good question. I think the big pieces there are, 2020 for everyone, I'm sure, has been one of mindfulness and just, you're not doing the things usually you've done. You're focused on, like I've gotten much closer with certain relationships in my life that were really close in college and my family, but I've gotten even closer with them. And other folks I just haven't spent as much time with. Or within work, it's been a filtering mechanism, right? Is this job that I'm doing actually something that is meaningful to me or that I want to spend my time and effort doing? So I think for me, the two pieces are the awareness and the patience piece, I think are really tested in 2020, is being much more aware of your actions and you just have to be patient, right? We don't know when this thing's going to end. We don't know when the vaccine's going to come. We don't know a lot of things. A lot of that stuff's out of our control. So I think you do have to relinquish some control. And I guess that's where the detachment piece comes in to try to practice is, trying to improve what you can improve within yourself versus trying to tackle something external that might be outside of your control. So I think the framework generally holds, but the focus on patience is super key for me.
Hey, Sagar. So I had a couple questions. So you mentioned that part of your, I guess, motivation for leaving your company was to work on problems that you saw in the software industry. So I guess my first question is, if you could talk maybe a little bit about those problems. And then my second question is, do you think that you would have been able to identify these problems if you had always been working in this industry? Or do you think because you had shifted over late that was able to give you this newer perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say that this is a problem that has to come from within the industry. I think it's hard to understand the nuances if you haven't gone through it. So the problem basically is, I think it's a general business problem, is a disconnect between what the buyer wants in a software sale and what the seller can provide. I mean, there's so much software saturation happening in the market today. There's 70% of business applications are on premises, and there's a massive move to the cloud. So in the next 5 years, there's going to be an exponential increase in software cloud-based companies. And because of that, everybody's just vying. There might be 10 or 20 competitors for one category of software. So buyers are just getting exhausted, right? They're getting hit up by all these people and cold emailed, and everybody wants their money, and nobody's really trying to understand their problems and their pain points and tailor their solution to the buyer. So that's a high level 10,000 foot view of the problem, is how do we take our core competencies as a software company, capabilities, index them to the buyer's needs, and then help create a better buyer experience. I don't know if, that's the general problem that I'm trying to solve. And your second question of, would I have known that if I'd come earlier or later? I think it's because I joined a company that scaled from 10 people to a larger company, pre-IPO company. I saw a lot of these problems that came with scale in different stages, and I think that really helped me figure out what the areas are to focus on, how we can make that better. You know, what's the buyer missing out on? What are areas of opportunity we can really try to up level the sales process, or how we go and sell the technology. So I think it's unfortunate to have gone through these experiences because it revealed a lot, and you know, what problems I want to solve.
That's great. Thanks, Sagar.
So I have a question for you, Sagar. First of all, thank you for being a Morehead-Cain mentor, which is, I mean, I'm sure everybody on this call now is jealous, thinking someone gets to be mentored by this person. I wish it was me. But your mentee is also on the call. So I'd love to hear maybe from each of you how that process is going and what you think of it.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Vibhu, how's it going, man? Yeah, I think it's gone really well. It's been an incredible couple weeks. Of course, it's been all virtual. Vibhu's based in Charlotte, so hopefully we'll get a chance to meet up when I'm down there. But yeah, I think we've talked a lot about. We have a lot of mutual interests from software perspective and what we're each working on. So we've been able to have some good conversations there. And I think also with respect to our shared culture and upbringing and spirituality to some extent as well, we've discussed. So I think we've had a lot of dimensions to explore with each other. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say, Vibhu.
Yeah, Sagar. Yeah, first of all, that was a really good talk. I actually just skipped class to watch that. And yeah, I mean, I think like, I mean, the pairing has been, at first it was amazing how much we had in common. I was like, wow, how did people, like, how did you guys find so much in common? And yeah, exactly like Sagar said, we've explored a bunch of different dimensions. I feel like every call we have, there's always new stuff to talk about. We never really run out of anything. And yeah, I mean, I still learn so much from Sagar and everything that he says. And I could see a lot of it, that a lot of his decisions have been, you know, guided by this framework, which has been really important. And in trying to come up with my own framework like this, and when it comes time to, you know, making decisions. So yeah, definitely a great job with the mentorship pairing, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Great.
Thank you. I just wanted to do a little ad for the for the mentoring program. Please say yes if we ask you to mentor someone, alumni. Sandy, I see you have a question. Sandy Shaw, class of 66.
Yes, Sagar, thanks for the talk. I always hated people who knew what they wanted to do when they were 12. Matter of fact, I'm still trying to figure out what to do with my life. I guess my question, which emerged as you were talking, was, are these transitioning starting to fit into a pattern and a destination that you are not aware of, or are they telling you a different kind of person that you are finding you are trying to work your way toward?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting question. I think the more I look at all these experiences as data points, and you know, my math background, I guess, when you have a lot of data points in a scatter plot, you can see trend lines, right? You can start to map out, maybe extrapolate where that's going. So I think you can absolutely start to craft a destination. But I think going back to what my talk is, I think it would be doing yourself a disservice if you start to identify specific, like, I want to become the CEO of this company. Like if that was my goal, I think I would be losing out on opportunities for myself to learn and explore along the way. But that, I mean, I'd love to do that, right? I want to become a CEO. I want to run my own company. But along the way, I think it's letting the experiences I have navigate and take me there kind of naturally. But I think in a lot of these talks, 7 talks, and the ones that have happened in this section, I think what a theme that recurs is, looking back, there's always a pattern that emerges. I think the different experiences make sense. But looking forward, you're like, all right, what's next? What do I want to do next? Who am I going to become? So I think it's a mixture of both, right? It's kind of a sense of where you're headed, but you don't want that to limit you or create boundaries. But then looking back, I think it's always natural to be able to tell a story of how the dots connected.
Sagar, you've been very reserved, respectful by not telling us what your new company is. Most people would have taken 5 minutes to market it. Could you do so? Tell us what it is, but also what do you hope in 2 to 3 years, not business success, but you personally have learned or done with it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the company is called Foresight, and the goal is to develop a purpose-built knowledge base for sales teams of software companies to leverage in buying processes. So what Charlie was asking is, buyers will have all these needs and wants and desires, but those exist in email. Those might exist in a Word document. That might exist in someone's mind, tacit knowledge. And that we're losing on those opportunities to create better buyer experiences. So my goal is to scrape all that from different systems, institutionalize it into a database, and then have it really easily accessible within the sales process to give you foresight into what your buyers are looking for. So that's the product and the company. And yeah, I mean, I've talked to 30, 40 people in the past 3 weeks, and it's a huge need. I mean, I have a couple early adopters. I have a product that I'm working on, hoping to sign a couple deals in the early year. So there's good progress, good momentum. It's really exciting. And yeah, I mean, I would love, I guess, to your second part of your question, what I hope in 2 to 3 years, I think my dream in building a company is, for me, finding a problem to solve is just something that gets the wheels turning. It's not the goal. It's what I've loved. Sorry, there's some background noise here. Somebody's having a party outside. But the goal for me is I like to say, sell the dream, build the team. Like, I love recruiting. I love bringing people along the ride for the journey and seeing what we can do together. Like, that's why I love my experience at DealCloud and growing that from 10 people to how we grew. It was, how do we bring in the right people, create the right process, have fun along the way, and just kind of go down that path. So that's what I love to do in 2 to 3 years, is love to, work with a lot of folks in the network, interns, all that sort of stuff. I would love to be able to hire a lot of people and for us to have a great experience working together. And I think a company's legacy is defined by its alumni. So I would love for people in 2 to 3 years working to go off and start their own companies, or to go off and do something great, and I think us to look back and realize, look, we shared these experiences together, and we learned, we went through these grueling client experiences together, we solved these problems together. Like, at the end of the day, those memories are all we're ever going to have. So for me, I think that's what's driving all this. And yeah, of course, having fun. And I would be lying if I said there's no economic incentives, right, that people achieve and want to achieve. That's all fair, and that's part of the driving. But I wouldn't say that's the main decision, because there's a lot of ways to make money, right? And starting a company is not always the highest probability of success. So
Good luck.
Thank you.
I have another question for you, just personal curiosity, because I mean, I like what Terry said about your lack of defensiveness and your, sort of, you've always, you have that open personality and kind of just a real authenticity about you. But I wondered if there's anything you do lately for your own mental health, or maybe lifelong. I don't know what your sort of practices are. We've been talking a lot around the foundation about ways to take care of ourselves and what it is that we're doing to help ourselves. And I'd love to hear what some of your practices are.
Yeah, I love cooking, and Terry can tell you this. Recently went to his vacation home, my family, and we cooked a huge meal together, like a huge Indian Israeli meal with Kobe as well. So that was really exciting. So I think, it's definitely stressful, like doing the whole company thing in COVID, and I don't have people who have joined me just yet. We're still working on that. So it's a very lonely process, and it's exhausting, and it can be, yeah, I mean, there's a need for self-care and self-love and giving that back to yourself. So I think for me, cooking with other people, I love cooking with my roommates and cooking for people, that just really brings me a lot of joy. So that's something I do. I really big into music as well. So like my dad, he's really has a musical history. So I think that's gone down a generation. Listening to music, and back in college and high school, I used to DJ a bit as well. So putting playlists together and just enjoying that process. I don't dance as much as I used to in college, but that's definitely something that I use as a kind of a break. Yeah, but I think I'm still working on that. I don't think it's always evolving and adapting to the situation. So that's something I'm actively trying to figure out myself, actually. What are ways to do that and refill the energy tank, so to speak, so you can keep giving to your projects and people around you.
That's awesome. And if no one else has another question right away, do jump in and interrupt me. But I was curious, in your bio, you had mentioned real estate and sort of something that, your interest in real estate. I'd love to hear about how that kind of matches up with your other interests or what you're doing right now. Want to continue with that?
Yeah. So I'm from Charlotte, and Charlotte's is a boom town. So it's been growing exponentially. So when I left college, I worked at Red Ventures. I was staying at home for 6-7 months, and I said, I don't want to spend money on rent. Let's try to do some family investments and go into real estate. So bought a couple properties and rented them out with Airbnb and found some tenants, and I bought a property for myself as well. So I think that's where it comes from, is just trying to explore that market and go in at the right time. And that's actually evolved. My mom and I are working on a project now. She's been in the IT banking world for the past 20 years, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. And her vision, after having a lot of these discussions, is she wants to buy a big property and turn it into an event space, like a wedding venue and a creative, like a sculpture garden in Charlotte, like a new cool space within Charlotte that could be used for these types of events and venues. So yeah, when I'm going home in a couple of weeks, we're gonna go check a couple out and see if we can do that together. And I think that's always been a family goal, but also just a thing we've learned over time. So yeah, a dream of mine is, looking back 20 years from now, like every city I live in, if I'm able to have a place that I can come back to, right, and go back to my Charlotte place or New York place, I mean, that'll be nice. It's a long way to get there, but I think being able to experience the environment in which you're in and have a place that really represents who you are in that space is something that really appeals to me. So that's where that interest comes from.
Thank you. And I promise not to monopolize. If anyone else has, we have time for another question if anyone has one to throw in. Well, if not, I just have to say thanks again, Sagar. What an amazing opportunity to spend some time together and think about your framework and making the most of life's moments of transition. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the time.